What's going on, guys? We are here with DC's all-in one-shot, and man, let me tell you something. Son, you guys are not ready. So, what this does is this comes off the heels of Absolute Power, but no, it doesn't spoil the ending of Absolute Power, outside of the fact that the superheroes win. Of course they do. Wouldn't be much of a DC Comics landscape if all the superheroes died. But the thing about this is that it opens up basically with Superman kind of talking about the Justice League as a whole and the various issues that Earth has dealt with, right? He says, when the Justice League first came together, we wanted to give humanity a helping hand, to combine our power and compassion to make the world a better place. But recently, there have been times of darkness, loss, betrayal, nightmares, change. When our enemies came together to take advantage of us, we survived like we always do, but knew if we were coming back, we needed to do something different. Now, this is par for the course when it comes to DC Comics, right? Hearken alas, some villain has done something and it's really dangerous and we're on the ropes, but we come back and we win, we learn our lesson, and then we reunite in a way that we haven't done since the last time we did it, and then something will happen that'll break us apart, and then we'll unify again later on down the line. It's what DC does, right, when it comes to the Justice League. What is cool, though, is that this is going to bring in something incredibly familiar to all of you, because what happens is Superman goes to visit Booster Gold. Now, Booster Gold's a really cool character. I'm excited to see him in the movies. I know Comic Drake is losing his mind over the idea of Booster Gold being in the DCU, but the thing about this is that Booster Gold is actually a guy from the future. Like, literally, it's one of the things he talks about here in a second. I love the way they do his origin. They don't make it overly complex, but it is still cool, right? That Booster Gold is basically doing his superhero thing, and of course he has Skeets along with him. Now, Skeets is awesome, right? Like, imagine Jarvis from the MCU, but like he traveled alongside Iron Man all the time, giving his own like commentary, and that's what Skeets is, right? He's like a really sarcastic type of character, but also a kind of cheerleader, a little robot that flies with him. But when Superman shows up here, he presents Booster Gold with a Justice League card. Now, the thing about Booster is it's what he's always wanted. And that's what he says, right? He's like, finally. And the response to Superman is, what do you mean, Booster? You've been on the Justice League before. And Booster's response is he says, you don't get it, big guy. I remember this. And he says, you know how I was a star athlete in the future, would have gone pro, but I made some unfortunate mistakes and it sent my whole life into the dumps. The only job that would take me in was a museum in Metropolis. I would walk down the Hall of Heroes surrounded by greatness. It inspired me. When I borrowed the artifacts from the museum, I made my way back to this time with the big idea to become a superhero. I thought to myself, I could make a name for myself, reclaim the glory that I'd lost. I've had some amazing adventures, but I gotta be honest, there were days when I felt lost, like I don't know my place in this time. And after Waller and Pariah and everything, I started to think that it was time to go home, take responsibility for my actions in my future, and try to build a new life here. But now, as I've traveled through time, I've noticed certain touchstone items, absolutes in the universe. Batarangs, your Fortress of Solitude, the Green Lantern's rings, my Legion ring, and this membership card. And it's cool because he says, I saw one once in the museum. It was blank. It was an artifact from a great moment in heroic history, a time of unity and peace, when everyone came together to support each other. So it's kind of offering this statement of it being somewhat of a paradigm shift when it comes to the superhero landscape in DC Comics. More so than that, while Booster Gold has been a quote-unquote member of the Justice League, if my memory serves me correctly, he's never actually held a Justice League identification card. So it's like his first time of officially being inducted into the league, which is all he ever really wanted, right? It was like his life's desire to be a true superhero and to truly be a part of the league. But what Superman reveals here is that the reason Booster has been given a Justice League identification card is because they're officially expanding the roster of the Justice League. That traditionally, they always kept the league small, right? A very minor number of people. And for a couple reasons, it probably made sense. Number one, because of the fact that all the heavy hitters were on one team. Maybe it gave other superheroes something to aspire to. And plus, like, DC Comics was always doing a throwback to like the original Justice League of America from Brave and the Bold. But there's a cool thing, and this is the familiarity that I was telling you guys about. It's not the big reveal that we get, right? But it is a familiarity I was telling you guys about. What ends up happening is that Mr. Terrific addresses all these superheroes who are arriving here. And he says, welcome to the new Justice League Watchtower. If we're going to have the biggest roster ever, we need the biggest base ever, powered by magic and science, a place where our best minds can come together and help each other. BoomTube Tech to get our teams to missions as fast as possible. Oracle set up our computers and communications, and you might have seen our head of security, the Question, walking the halls. And so with great honor, we welcome you to Justice League Unlimited. And I know some of you guys out there who grew up with Justice League Unlimited are absolutely hyped because you finally get to see it adapted properly in DC Comics. Here is a shameful admission though. I've never watched Justice League Unlimited. I've seen scenes, but I've never watched the show. Should I watch the show? That's the question that I have for you guys down in the comments. But what he says is this is more than our headquarters, it's home and a place we can pool our resources, support each other, and communicate in a way that ensures something like what happened with Amanda Waller never happens again. We're better together. These membership cards are so much more than they seem, more than just access to the Watchtower. Each card has been personalized to you and your powers to help and augment your abilities and pair you with others that can do the same. And then he says this card here will remain blank to represent the next hero to join our ranks, that there's always a place for those individuals who develop new powers and look to do something great in the world. And so it's cool because even Booster is just kind of like, man, you know, like this is so exciting. Now, as you guys know is tradition with DC Comics, when all the superheroes are gathered together and everybody's celebrating and having a good time, what does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means shit's about to pop off. And that's exactly what happens, son, because immediately all hell starts breaking loose. Alarms start going off, right? There's literally holes burning in reality. People don't understand what in the world is going on. But then suddenly, like the magic wielders of DC are possessed, right? Finally, I will know the truth because you will tell it to me, Jim Corrigan, the Spectre. Now, as you notice, the words are upside down. There's a reason for that, because we get one half of the story, then literally if you have the physical comic, you flip it over and you get the other half. And the reason why all these guys are speaking this way, Darkseid is, right? Darkseid's here, ladies and gents, and like Omega beams start firing off in every direction and people are just like, okay, what's going on? And then Darkseid emerges from this boom tube with a battle axe attached to a missing hand, bonded to the Spectre. I gotta be honest, guys, man, it is the most dope depiction of Darkseid I have ever seen in DC Comics. Holy cow, right? Now here's the thing, here's what's cool about this. When we get to the second half of this, we're gonna get the whole thing from Darkseid's perspective. And what I'm gonna tell you guys right now, Darkseid is more powerful than he's ever been in the history of DC Comics. And I'll tell you guys right now, son. For those of you guys who don't know about Darkseid, this guy is walking, talking death. I mean, it's Man, let me tell you something, son. Y'all are not ready for what happens in the second half of this comic. Y'all are not ready. So what ends up happening is the superheroes do exactly what you would expect them to do, right? They all start going on the attack against Darkseid. There isn't really anything they can do, but one of the things that's cool here, right? Darkseid says, if it's a fight you want, so be it, but you will tell me what has been hidden from me. Now, there is something cool that's going on here. I won't tell you guys what it is until we get to the second half, because it's gonna blow away everything that's happening right here, right? It's gonna totally change things. But what ends up happening here is that because Darkseid is imbued with the power of the Spectre, the first step is to remove the Spectre from him, right? The living embodiment of God's wrath. And so that's exactly what Zatanna says. Darkseid is just like smacking the Justice League around, right? I mean, just casually folding these guys, and it's not even close. But Zatanna's just like, okay, the Spectre is currently resisting Darkseid. That means their bond is not complete. And so she says, our best chance of putting a stop to this is to separate them. We just need time. And so what happens is that Wonder Woman steps in with her lasso of truth, and then just like Darkseid starts talking smash, right? He's just like, Diana, one of the Amazons, men may fear your lasso of truth, but not Darkseid. The truth is all I was after this day. Now I have found it, and it is glorious. And so Zatanna uses magic on Superman. Now, most of you guys are just kind of like, well, Superman's traditionally weak to magic. Yes and no, right? Traditionally, yes, he is weak to magic, and magic is one of the ways that you can overpower Superman. But as we saw in the tie-in from Absolute Power, which we already did cover, Superman's weakness to magic is more of a psychological fear than an actual legitimate weakness. At least that seems to be the case in the story. So much so that he was actually using magic alongside Zatanna in order to help them escape the place between dimensions. So again, it's cool to see that DC's making these small modifications. It's how you get to a point where Superman's just like this legitimate demigod that is basically indestructible by all standards of measurement. We're going back to the Silver Age, chaps. And so what happens is Batman throws his rope around Darkseid like that's gonna do anything. And then Wonder Woman has him trapped with her lasso of truth. And again, it's awesome because Superman sort of jumps in, and between the magic that Superman's imbued with, as well as the magic of Dr. Fate and Raven and Boston Brand, Deadman, and Zatanna, that they're basically able to seemingly separate the Spectre from Darkseid. But here's the cool thing that goes on here, right? Seemingly, the Earth splits in two copies of itself. Now, we'll find out what all is going on here behind the scenes in the second half of this, but Darkseid literally just says, thank you, Darkseid ends, and then teleports away, leaving behind a kind of rift in space, almost an invitation to follow. And so what happens following this is it's like, okay, Superman's like, we have our first mission, what's going on? He asks the question, where is Darkseid? Now the first person they ask here is of course Orion, because Orion is the son of Darkseid. And while he is a superhero, he literally just says, my father is not on his home of Apokolips. I have spoken to my contacts and there has been no sign of him since the attack. And when the question's asked, what's your take on all of this, because you know him better than anybody else, the response of Orion is Darkseid is a constant. All of creation needs a Darkseid. If he is truly gone, the universe will simply just create a new one. I must return to New Genesis and consult with Highfather to learn more. Now, for those of you guys who don't know the relationship between Highfather and Darkseid, we don't really have to go into it here. They're kind of like these living embodiments of good versus evil, not in a true legitimate sense. That would be like the presence in Lucifer Morningstar in DC Comics, in more of a metaphorical sense, right? Good versus evil, right versus wrong, that kind of a thing, even though Highfather can really be a dick sometimes. But when Orion takes off, you have Batman who's just like, okay, like let us know when you get back and what information you have. And Batman in turn follows up and he says this membership card was at the epicenter of Darkseid's attack and appears to have absorbed some of his anti-life energies. And that's when Terrific says, and now it acts as a doorway. Of course, the most logical question is, a doorway to what? And what Terrific says here is really incredibly important. He says, ever since the multiverse was cut off, I've been studying its impact on our universe. And after Darkseid's death, I noticed something. A hidden world that we'd found before had been activated. Now, one of the things to know is this segment here takes place a little bit after Darkseid had left. So there's that little bit of a time skip. I don't know, maybe a few hours or something like that. But Superman realizes that this world that Mr. Terrific is talking about is the Elseworld. And he says, correct. The Alpha World. After Perpetua and the Darkest Knight's defeat, our timeline was restored and we detected new worlds in the multiverse. I'll explain what that means here in a second. And he says, when we first discovered this Alpha World, we couldn't see into it, but were able to deduce what it was in a primordial state and unfinished, close to our vibrational pattern, but new. And now it's changed. It is now a finished world that radiates the same kind of energy as Darkseid. Now, here's what Mr. Terrific is talking about here, right? Most of you guys have heard of a comic book story called Crisis on Infinite Earths. And if you've heard about this, bear with me here. This is really more for the new folks who don't know anything about this. In DC Comics, they have only ever really truly rebooted twice, which is to say, we're starting the superheroes from zero. Bruce Wayne's becoming Batman for the very first time. Clark Kent's becoming Superman for the very first time. The first time that happened was Crisis on Infinite Earths. The second time it happened was the New 52. Yes, there were a few caveats, Batman's history, yada, 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 but that was the overall gist of what DC was shooting for. You've also heard of stories like Infinite Crisis or 0 Hour or Final Crisis. Those were more making adjustments, right? So Crisis on Infinite Earths was, we're rebooting everything. Everybody starts from zero. 0 Hour, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis was, okay, and here's a couple of events to clean up just a few little things that we may have missed along the way. And then DC's like, New 52, we reboot yet again, right? What each of these reboots meant is that it reset everybody to zero and nobody ever remembered anything that came before. What Mr. Terrific is talking about here with regards to Perpetua and the Darkest Nights, that was a story called Dark Knight's Death Metal. In essence, the basis behind that story was to essentially restore everybody's memories of everything that had ever happened over the course of the DC landscape, including the various crisis events that took place. So now Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, all these guys, they remember the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, the destruction of the multiverse, and the multiverse's return during Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis. They remember all these things, and they've basically been studying it this entire time. So hopefully that kind of clears things up and gives you guys some perspective here. But what happens in this conversation is Wonder Woman asks the question, we are going to this place, right? And Batman's response is, I would advise against that. And so they're kind of like, okay, let's go talk. There has to be a way. But what happens is Mr. Terrific says, I have to offer you guys a warning. The multiverse is sometimes easier to explain if you look at it like a map and the universes are in different locations. Specifically, this multiverse map. You guys have seen it a million times before, even if you didn't necessarily know what it meant. But what he says is, this is not actually what the multiverse looks like, right? Like if this was an accurate representation of the multiverse, you would just see a single Earth just in the middle of it, and that would be it. But what he says is all the worlds occupy the same space at different vibrations. Barry Allen used to say that each world had its own pattern. You could tell where you were if you could see or feel the vibrations of that universe. And this world's vibrations are chaotic. And so it's kind of like, then what do we do, right? Like, do we enter into this place? Like, how do we access it? And the response of Mr. Terrific is, the only people that can go there and remain safe and then return are time travelers. And that's when Booster Gold pops up, because time travelers have the ability to move back and forth through space and time without being influenced by the world around them. It's why Booster Gold doesn't travel 30 years into the past, and when he arrives, he's a toddler, or why he travels 30 years into the future, and when he arrives, he's like 60. I don't know his exact age, but they're the only ones that can access it. And so, of course, Booster Gold shows up, and he's told by Mr. Terrific, make sure you keep Skeets with you. Do not lose this guy. He's your tether. He will anchor you back to this reality. Now, this is also an incredibly important moment for Booster, because it means he gets to be a superhero, the superhero that he's always wanted to be, and to do true superhero things. Plus, who wouldn't want to explore some alternate reality that exists out there? The kicker is that when he arrives here, number one, he immediately loses Skeets, so he's effectively trapped here. And number two, Darkseid has conquered this entire world. But it's not what you think. There are a couple of recognizable symbols here, the Daily Planet, different things along those lines. But when Booster Gold looks up, he realizes that Darkseid has basically formed a legion unto himself. And that's when you flip over and get the other side of this story, because you start back 52 days before all of this. And what happens is Darkseid had basically worked with a guy by the name of Hyman. And when I say worked with, I mean like he had him in prison under threat of death. And what he did is he lied to him and told him he would restore his daughter Becca back to life if Hyman was willing to develop a machine for him. Now, Hyman's particularly important in DC Comics because he's the one that developed the mother boxes, the teleportation boxes that Darkseid uses, which open boom tubes that allow him to jump. all throughout the cosmos. The issue is that being able to use this machine requires the sacrifice of blood. And so Darkseid initially makes his own blood offering. The problem with this is that it's not enough. And so like Kalibak shows up, and Kalibak basically tells Darkseid that he and Granny Goodness and basically these other henchmen of Darkseid have built an army out of some of the most powerful beings that exist across the universe. Now, understand this. When Darkseid creates an army, he doesn't do like the Romans did, right? Where like he grabs you and he just brings you in, and then like you kind of maintain your own identity to a degree, but you worship like Roman gods and follow. No. You get turned into a parademon, and the entire process is incredibly gruesome. We won't go into it here, but it's pretty twisted. The important thing is that seemingly what's been going on here is they're not just transforming people into parademons, they're transforming them into paradevils, which basically means that they maintain all the physical attributes of their respective races, but they're bent to the will of Darkseid. So Daxamites, who are an offshoot of the Kryptonians, they have all the same powers as Kryptonians. Zarnians, which is the race of Lobo, although it seems weird because there aren't supposed to be any left. Most likely they're like the time-displaced Zarnian pirates that we saw in the Batman Superman book. But the bigger thing here is they're all here for Darkseid. But the reason why Kalibak and all his guys have done this is because at the moment right now, when Darkseid's talking to them, basically absolute power is going on. The superheroes are at their weakest point, and there's never been a better opportunity for Darkseid to invade Earth and conquer it. The one planet he's never really been able to get his hands on, but has always desired. Not that dissimilar from Galactus in Marvel. But Darkseid doesn't care anything about this. He's on a much bigger quest. And so initially, Darkseid goes to attack his henchmen, and Kalibak says, no, we are your blood. We will not leave you. Whatever you are seeking, we will help. And that's when it occurs to Darkseid. You're right? You're 100% right, Kalibak. You are my blood. And he grabs Kalibak and then throws him into the machine. And the machine immediately activates, right? Bonding complete. And it says, with the machine operational, there was only one thing left to do. Find him. The one being who might help me understand why it is that he feels so disconnected. Because Darkseid feels disconnected and removed and somehow diminished with regards to what's happening in the DC landscape right now. And he says, and so began my campaign. As I raged across the realms, I could feel him being kept from me, hidden. And what he's done here is Darkseid has invaded Hell, which is currently ruled over by Blaze, alongside Satanus, as well as Trigon. Now, here's the kicker when it comes to Hell in DC Comics, and it's the only way that I really know how to square this circle, because there is Lucifer Morningstar, who's seemingly the antithesis of the Presence, but then there's also the first of the Fallen, and then there's like other beings who have ruled over the throne of Hell. That the way it seems to work in DC, and correct me if I'm wrong here down in the comments, which you'll do anyway, what goes on here is whoever is sitting on the throne of Hell is the ruler of Hell at that point in time. And it changes based on what story is being told and how that story is being handled. More often than not, Lucifer does not cross over with the superheroes in DC Comics. In fact, I don't know if he ever really has. The same with the Presence, right? They rarely ever meet any of the superheroes in any capacity whatsoever. In the end, it's not really the biggest thing ever, because all that really happens is that it's established here, Darkseid is equal in power, if not potentially greater in power, than each one of these guys here. Even Trigon, right? Which is kind of nuts to establish that Darkseid is on that level of strength. He doesn't stay here very long. Instead, he realizes pretty quickly that basically the person he's looking for isn't here. And so he effectively opens a boom tube and then leaves. The next place he goes to is Heaven, where he encounters Zuriel. Again, he doesn't encounter the Presence here. So it's kind of a weird little thing. You could even make an argument that like these are more like lieutenants, captains, people who rule these sections of Heaven and Hell, as opposed to like the actual absolute rulers. But the only thing that matters is, much like it was when he was in Hell, he realized the person that he's searching for is not here. And so he leaves and he goes to the dark side of the moon. When he gets there, he encounters Eclipso. Now, unlike guys like the Presence or Lucifer Morningstar, who rarely have dealings with superhero, Eclipso deals with superheroes more often. Not that often, but more often than the other guys. In fact, he actually did it during Justice League versus the Suicide Squad. The story was not nearly as cool as you think it is. But what goes on here is that Eclipso is at his most powerful in the darkness, and Eclipso immediately starts tearing into Darkseid. Now, Eclipso represents the embodiment of God's wrath, where the Spectre represents the embodiment of God's vengeance, but they're all different facets of God itself. And so what happens is Eclipso gets the upper hand on Darkseid. And one of the things it says is like, I will keep you here and I will torture you here for all eternity, right? A slave for the next 1,000 years. And I will do it just because I can. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. But what Darkseid did is he set in motion a plan. That what he did is he basically created a boom tube in what was called the Dog Star, right? The brightest sun in the entire galaxy. And what happens is when he activates the boom tube, it basically shines the entire dark side of the moon in light, which is the one real weakness of Eclipso, and disintegrates him on the spot. After that, he goes hunting and he finds the person he was looking for, Jim Corrigan, the host of the Spectre. But before he can do anything, he's immediately met by the Quintessence. Now, the Quintessence is a kind of coming together of various leaders of some of the most powerful groups in DC Comics, right? Highfather, Phantom Stranger, Ganthet from the Guardians of the Universe. But these guys are about the closest you get in DC Comics to the traditional Skyfathers of Marvel Comics. Odin, Zeus, Vishnu, all those different guys. But truth to tell, there's nothing the Quintessence can do, because what they tell Darkseid is the Spectre cannot be bonded to anybody that it doesn't choose to bond with. The Spectre's power is beyond even you, and you can't force it to bond with you. So this whole journey was all for nothing. But what does Darkseid say? That's all true, but I've taken steps to change the rules. I've built a machine, a miracle machine, and now all I have to do is make a wish. Now, the miracle machine goes all the way back to Final Crisis. It's how Superman originally defeated Darkseid. That Superman, 1, built the miracle machine as a wishing box, and 2, he sung, which is kind of weird. Yes, Superman sings and he defeated Darkseid with music. It's kind of nuts, right? Superman's a Swiftie. And so what happens is Darkseid uses the miracle machine and is like, I wish to bond with the Spectre. And the Spectre is pulled from Jim Corrigan and bonds with Darkseid. When that happens, that's when things go sideways. That's why in the first part of the story, holes were being burned in reality, because Darkseid was basically defying reality. But what he wants is to know something, right? What was the surge that I felt? Why do I feel so split apart? And so when he enters through the boom tube and he's yanked to the Justice League watchtower and he says, if it's a fight you want, so be it, but tell me what has been hidden from me. He's not talking to the Justice League, he's talking to the Spectre, because the Spectre is behind the Justice League. He's looking past them, not looking at them, right? And that's what the Spectre says, look around you, Yuxas. This is who you are. This is your part. Relish it. You are a key player in the universe. Of course, Yuxas being the true name of Darkseid. And this is where you get this full revelation. And those of you guys who are Darkseid fans, who basically just kind of went with the true form Darkseid concept that fans just made up, now it becomes absolute, because what he says, at least what the Spectre says, is, I am telling you, you need to listen, to feel these words. Everything has a balance to it. Our reality may be complex in many wondrous and terrifying ways, but there is also a raw simplicity to it. For at its core is life. A force that expands, multiplies against all odds. Life emerges from the dark and races onward. It is hope. And if there is a being that embodies that hope, that energy, it is him, Superman. But there is an opposing force to all of that. Constraint, control, and that is you. In a way, you are the true source wall that holds it all back. It's why you have no double in the multiverse, Yuxas. You are an essential force. You are primal. Long ago, when life was consolidated, so were you. But as life expanded, aspects of you, your energy, were channeled to every world to hold life back, to challenge it. When the multiverse expanded into an omniverse, those aspects were scattered further, making you, your physical being, less. That is the diminishment you have felt, but it is natural. And he asked the question, what about when the multiverse was sealed? The response of the Spectre, right now, there is only you. All your power gathered into you, untapped. You vibrate with it, you can sense it, if not access it. But what you need to do is be patient, because the multiverse will come back, the omniverse, and as it does, your power will funnel into those worlds again. You will not feel this restless, this explosive. This is your role, Darkseid. It is an honor, divine and essential. And Darkseid simply asks, and what if I want more? But at the end of the day, he also muses and says, but like the Spectre doesn't have to answer, because suddenly Darkseid knows his role. And he says, I am there fighting them all. The Amazon's lasso is on me and I am taunting them, but I am also not there because I am seeing my story, seeing it in its entirety. I see every fight I have ever had, every fight I would have, and I see that he is right. The Spectre, this role of mine, the ebb and flow of it, being more at times, less at times, a god upon, all of it is the way of things. It would always be this way, but I am finished with always. And so Darkseid says, then it ends. I end. I let the Spectre be torn from me and I open myself to it, to death. And as I end, I begin again, but this time alone, bound by no relationships to Earth, to the Kryptonian, to anything. If that world is driven by life, by hope, then this one would be driven by challenge, by turmoil. In effect, Darkseid has created his own Earth, really his own universe, right? This is the absolute universe in DC Comics. It's their version of the Ultimate Universe from Marvel Comics. But unlike the Ultimate Universe, where it's just more of a real world depiction of superheroes in Marvel, this is basically a world of chaos and suffering. Truth to tell, if we're using a more accurate comparison here, it would be like if the Age of Apokolips in Marvel Comics was its own universe, which for 6 months it was. But if it was its own universe, that's what it would be here, right? He says, this is a place where all the superheroes' advantages are gone, where they are the small chaos instead of the system itself. A world where hope is the underdog, where it is the villain, the opposing force, and where it will have to burn brighter than ever before to survive at all. It is a universe that exists out of time and space, hidden as the truth was hidden from me. Its timeline complete and yet still solidifying. Above it all is mine. It is me. It is reality where I can finally become what I was meant to be, where I am unleashed, where I may grow 1,000 feet tall, where my voice will shake planets. A reality where Darkseid will be. That's the cool thing. True form Darkseid becomes God. And now this whole universe exists under him. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. I am excited to see where Absolute DC takes us because this sounds incredibly awesome. If ever there were a universe where emo kids wanted to just hang around all day, smoking cigarettes, listening to The Cure, talking about how difficult life is, this would be it. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like and I will catch you all later. Peace.